Okay, Peter. So I wanted to talk today about the enigma that is Oleksandr Usyk, and that seems to be becoming more of an enigma as we go along. And interestingly enough, I just want to recap on his career a bit and talk about where he is now. And he is, I think, going to be suffering from something I'm going to coin the Dylan White syndrome. And I'll explain why I'm going to call it the Dylan White syndrome. It's an unfortunate place to get to in boxing, it seems, and I think Usyk might be heading there, unfortunately. But if we recap about this incredibly talented fighter and where he's come from. So Ukrainian, born in 1987. Now, Usyk played football up to the age of 15 and then switched to boxing. So after switching to boxing, he was obviously identified very quickly as a bit of a prodigy, brought along very fast. And he was 4 years later, he was at the European Championships. And, his amateur career has been absolutely stellar. So he had 350 amateur fights, if we're to believe the stats, 335 wins and 15 losses, capping it off in 2011 with a world championship win at heavyweight. Incidentally, when he fought some really tough guys, Artur Bibitov was in his weight class, as he was at the 2012 Olympics. And in the 2012 Olympics, of course, he reached the pinnacle of becoming an Olympic champion at heavyweight with that gold medal. So, when Anthony Joshua won the super heavy gold. So, his career even then was characterised by the speed of his accomplishments, how he would come through these tough competitions, he would always win. And, so a real standout and exciting prospect for pro. He hung around a little bit and then he decided to sign with the Klitschko brothers, with K2 Promotions. And he turned over in 2013 at the age of 26. And again, his assault on the pros was spectacular. In his 10th fight, he won his first world title. And it wasn't a gimme world title. It wasn't a bit like, maybe Joshua's first world title win wasn't that great. That fell quite nicely for him. He fought the Polish Golowski, who was, I think, 23-0 with 16 KOs at that point. And Usyk was 9-0 with 9 KOs. Fight did go the distance, but his 10th fight is a world champion. Then it came up with the World Super Series of Boxing in the cruiserweight division. You had great guys in there like Marco Huck, who he beat, and obviously other world champions in there. Again, undefeated records, guys with high knockout ratios, and Usyk beats them all. He wins the Muhammad Ali Trophy, and in his 15th fight as a professional, he becomes the undisputed cruiserweight champion and the first fighter in cruiserweight history to hold the 4 major belts, and only the 5th fighter in boxing history to hold those belts simultaneously. So, the sky's the limit for this guy. The obvious step is to follow the Holyfield route, go from cruiserweight to heavyweight and try and dominate the heavyweights. He takes that fight in 2018 against Tony Bellew, just to sort of sign off from cruiserweight, wins that fairly comfortably with an 8th round stoppage, jumps up to the heavies. Okay, so now you think, right, now Usyk is coming for the heavies. This is quite exciting. Interestingly enough, as he was the WBO super champion at cruiserweight, he becomes the WBO mandatory #1 contender at heavyweight. So the the WBO champion at heavyweight, as we all know, is Anthony Joshua. So all of a sudden, Usyk becomes the #1 contender for the WBO. Now, this is where I'm coming back to. You think he's going to have a great route into the big boys in the division. But understandably, they say to him, well, maybe let's take a tune-up fight at heavyweight, see how you feel about it. And so he does take that tune-up fight. A few opponents fall through. He ends up fighting a guy called Chaz Witherspoon. Chaz Witherspoon, good fighter, but maybe not a real gatekeeper fighter for the heavyweight division, and he wins that by knockout. Then he doesn't seem to be getting any closer to Anthony Joshua at this time. And again, he's in this #1 mandatory condition, and this is the position. And this is why I talk about the Dylan White syndrome. Dylan White has now been the WBC mandatory challenger for over 1,000 days. Okay, think about that. That's over 3 years. And he's no closer, it seems, to getting a shot at the WBC title, now held by Tyson Fury, previously held by Wilder, because he's seen as a dangerous opponent who maybe, doesn't bring the big money that the big beasts get. Wilder, Joshua and Fury have almost got this locked up. And you can imagine they've almost got it locked up for the next year or two, fighting each other. Because who's Fury going to fight? Well, he's going to mandate to fight Wilder, and then after that, he's going to want to fight Joshua. Joshua looks like he's going to fight Pulev. Then he wants to fight Fury. He may end up fighting Wilder. So that's going to take another couple of years. And, so they've got it locked up there. So Usyk fights Chaz Witherspoon, and then Eddie Hearn maybe placates him and says, why don't you have another little tune-up fight, Derek Chisora, real tough guy, be an exciting fight. Again, a real good heavyweight gatekeeper. So, okay, signs on to fight Chisora. That fight, that was supposed to happen in May. Obviously, because of the pandemic, it hasn't happened. There's been no talk of it coming onto the Matchroom, the Matchroom Garden shows, like we've got White Povetkin happening on that show. It just doesn't seem to be there until the crowds come back or until things come back to boxing. And I want you to think about this for Usyk as well, for his career trajectory, as I've said to you, phenomenally fast, speed of his accomplishments is incredible. So think about those 350 amateur fights. If we look at those 350 amateur fights, if you say his amateur career spanned from 2015, from when he was 15 until when in 2002 until he turned over when he was 26. So that's 11 years. Now, if you take out the fact that after the 2012 Olympics he didn't fight, obviously he's waiting to get his pro deal and searching around. You take out the off season, you take out, forget all that. Let's just say he had an 11-year amateur career. If he had 350 fights, he was fighting on average 11 days, every 11 days. So he's incredibly busy. And like I say, racking up all those pro fights in the cruiserweight division, 10th fight wins the title, 15th fight wins the undisputed title, and then he jumps to heavyweight, and it all grinds to a halt. You know, he's had one fight against Chaz Witherspoon at heavyweight, and he hasn't got another date in the diary. And I know a lot of these things are out of our control, but still, and also the prospect of him fighting where he wants to fight, one of the champions, bearing in mind he's now 33, so if he's not going to get a shot at Joshua at a title next year, because the WBO are unlikely to strip Joshua, because the amount of money Joshua will make in his next few fights as WBO champion, and they're working on commission, is phenomenal. So, you know, it's really, Usyk seems stuck in this perennial contender thing. So what is it? What are his other options? Well, he could fight White. From a boxing fan's point of view, that would make sense. You know, fight the other leading #1 contender. He could fight a lot of dangerous guys coming up. But again, he could get into that White position where you're almost that second tier, and you know nobody wants to fight you coming up because you're too dangerous. Nobody wants to fight you at the top three because you're too dangerous and you're not a big enough draw. And this is what I think is Usyk's problem as well, that he needs to confront. He's not a big enough draw. He's an incredibly talented fighter. He's a very exciting fighter. But he needs something more than that to succeed in this heavyweight division at the moment. He needs character. And I mean, the ultimate test of character, the ultimate test of somebody they think they know and they want to see fight. Look at Mike Tyson, blowing everybody's numbers out of the water at 54, not having fought in 17 years. He comes back, Canelo's date is eclipsed. And, you know, all of a sudden, Mike is the big draw on September the 12th and the big pay-per-view event because he's a character. Tyson Fury is a character. Joshua is a character we think we know. And Wilder is a character as well. Usyk just doesn't seem to, we can't connect with him. We see these funny videos of him dancing. You know, his little sort of slightly camp dance warm-ups. We see him playing golf in odd shoes. You know, he just seems a bit of an oddball, and boxing is littered with a history of oddballs, as you know. Does seem to attract them, but we can't quite pin him down. And I think, you know, on top of that, apparently he does speak okay English, but he won't converse in English at press conferences after fights and stuff like that. You know, maybe he's not confident enough in the language, but that obviously affects a large segment of the boxing population's interactions with him. And just having that talent, I think, you've got to realise boxing is show business with blood. And he needs to bring a bit more of the show business along with that huge, huge talent. So I just think Oleksandr Usyk is in a bit of a dead end at the moment, and I can't quite see a way out of it. That's why I'm calling it the Dylan White syndrome. And that's why I think, you know, how are we going to shift these boulders in his way? I mean, we've got the pandemic in the way, so he needs to fight, you know, behind closed doors shows, but he needs to get on them, and he's not scheduled on them. He really needs a big fight. He needs to fight Andy Joshua. He needs to fight, you know, one of the top three, but there's no prospect of that. So where does Usyk go? I'm afraid, Peter, I'm not really answering my own question, am I? But I don't think it's a great position for such a talent to be in. And imagine his perspective, all those fights, all that speed of accomplishment, and here you are at 33, you've got nothing in the pipeline.